Madam Prime Minister, Ambassador, members of the American Chamber of Commerce, dear friends, thank you so much for letting me join you on this very special occasion, and allow me also to share my thoughts on what human development is about, because we've already had some very inspiring insights into the notion. First of all, I'd like to say that a Human Development Prize, as far as I can tell, and as far as I've been able to investigate, is only awarded in Latvia. This is a unique prize, a unique award, and a unique form of recognition of human development that no other country has thought up so far. So I'm sure you'll have emulators in the future. Human development. We already heard from Ambassador Pekala the notion of the Human Development Index with its 3 components. Coming from the UN background, what's been important with this Human Development Index is that it ranks countries by their performance and is in a way an instigator of better performance because it makes countries compete to be better, have better outcomes on literacy, on longevity, on health issues, and on income as well. But there's a deeper part, as we've already heard, but I'd like to also sort of emphasize, there's a deeper notion in human development going back to Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate and very famous both economist and philosopher, who I think had something very sophisticated in mind when he spoke about human development. His concern is with what he calls the broadening of choices, which I think is very much something that civil society organizations are about. And the enhancement of capabilities, which I think is something that Latvia as an innovation economy and as a knowledge economy is about. But with Amartya Sen's original thinking, it was a vision that every woman, every girl, every man, every boy would have the capacity, the capability in the environment to unfold their full potential, their full capabilities, because they are nurtured in terms of having food, but they are also nurtured intellectually. They have access to health, they have predictable, or their parents have predictable incomes and decent work. They live in democratically constructed societies, and they enjoy peace. And it's already been mentioned, but maybe to say again, because Latvia has had such an important part in the history of the end of the Cold War and reestablishing itself as an independent and flourishing country, that this idea was very seminal in 1990, because I can tell you as a development economist, up until 1990, development was only about economic progress. It was very economistic, it was very narrow. And having this human development concept come in saying that it's also about social development, environmental development, political democracy, freedom, human rights, was a huge change, a huge shift of paradigms, which I think was not coincidental that it only came up in the UN system as a notion, as a concept in 1990 when democracy returned to Eastern Europe. But what is also interesting about the notion of human development is that Latvia, interestingly, and I don't know if everyone is aware, actually took this notion a number of steps further, because Latvia has done a lot of work on the concept of human security. And human security refers not just to social and economic progress, but very strongly puts emphasis on environmental sustainability, a big topic now, and on political stability. And this interest in Latvia in academic circles and in policy circles, in a sort of deeper meaning of development, I would think one could argue stemmed from Latvia's independence movement, in which environmental sustainability was the trigger, as far as I can understand it, and democracy was the fundamental goal. So having this notion of human security being very much forwarded and promoted in Latvia, I think, is not a coincidence. Latvia developed the notion of securitability also as a sort of a companion term to human security. And this notion is very important both conceptually in academic circles, intellectual debates, but also in the development discussions and in policy making. Securitability, according to this Latvian definition, is, I quote, the ability to avoid insecure situations and to retain a sense of security when such situations do occur, as well as the ability to reestablish security and a sense of security when these have been compromised. In other words, to be able to bounce back when something very unpleasant happens politically, economically in the environment. And again, I think this concept of securitability resonates with Latvia's historical and repeated experiences of income insecurity, the vagaries in access to affordable, good quality health services, the environmental issues, the political uncertainties. The notion of securitability really stresses the individual's empowerment as well as her protection by the community, by civil society organizations, as well as by the state, by the government. Another intellectual contribution of Latvia has been the attention to subjective perceptions. So not just looking at objective outcomes, life expectancy ratios, statistics on GDP per capita, etc., but looking at how people actually perceive their situation. And it's very interesting that a decade before well-being and happiness discussions started to inform the international development debate, one of the Latvia Human Development Reports, the one on human security, actually offered findings not just on these objective indicators, but paired them with the assessment of human security perceptions in the population. 2 major sample surveys on this were carried out, one in 2002 and one more recently in 2012, and I believe another one in 2013 in a bit of a modified form, with very important findings on the areas of concern that people have and on their own capacity and the capacity of their community and their government to mitigate these threats. And as Madam Prime Minister will know very well, and I hope everyone knows, the National Development Plan of Latvia for 2014 to 2020 actually operationalized, if you will, the concept. And there are 5 priorities for achieving securitability, namely decent work, demographic growth, education and development of competencies or capacities, you might say, good health, and the sense of belonging through culture and cooperation. But having good analytical concepts is one thing, having rigorous analyses and having a path-breaking long-term development vision, it's all very well, but what does it mean for real life? What does it mean for all of us in everyday life? Do such concepts and notions that are very interesting intellectually, do they make any difference for people's and for nations' progress? Here I would venture to argue, if I may, that there has been a certain disconnection between these forward-looking, very inclusive and innovative theories and analyses of human development, a disconnect with policy practice. I know I'm an outsider, and this is not an occasion to argue, although I love to do that, to argue over different economic policies, but the outcomes for human development in Latvia have been quite mixed in the past. In the past 5 years, this country has on the one hand had the very proud success of joining the euro and of mastering the impact of the terrible financial crisis and recession, which was an international securitability issue that Latvia could not be blamed for. However, that success that Latvia can claim now came at the price of experiencing probably the harshest form of austerity applied anywhere in Europe, with a fiscal budget, as you know, slashed by 20% and 30% of public sector officials dismissed from their jobs. This has created economic hardship, new inequalities, emotional grief, and national stress. I think one would have wished for recent social and economic policy to be more holistically attuned to the ideas of human development, of balancing economic reform with social equity and progress. But on a positive note, I understand that there is now a major government effort, and Madam Prime Minister outlined what it entails to really reinstate equity, human development, securitability at the top of the priorities of the government. And I think it is really important to note that this very theoretical concept of securitability is actually budgeted for in the fiscal budget that Madam Prime Minister mentioned, and trying to create a convergence of the work and the activities and the responsibilities of very different kinds of ministries to come together around that notion of making people more secure. And I think that's, again, an excellent bringing together, making the connection again between theory and policy. And then finally, I think it is obviously very encouraging that responsible citizens in Latvia and the American Chamber of Commerce, with all their supporters, have come up with this idea of a Human Development Award, completely independent of the United Nations. I think that needs to be remarked as well, because it shows how a concept that started somewhere else has been sort of integrated into thinking in the society. And as we know, it will be accorded to, I believe, 4 winners this evening, singling out accomplishments in 4 areas that very much relate both to human development and to human security: social responsibility, commitment to education, which is a bit Amartya Sen's idea of capacities developing, contributions to health and well-being, and the 4th one, initiatives for the future of Latvia. What that award thereby does, it's acknowledging the role of outstanding individuals and organizations, the role that they've played for human development. But in my reading, it also acknowledges the notion of securitability, even if that term is not expressly used, because human development and human security has remained a vision in Latvia despite the adverse economic conditions and enormous political and other challenges of the past years. So my heartfelt congratulations, finalists. I've read all the descriptions of your work and the very inspiring winners, which none of us know yet, and I wish all of you all the best. Thank you very much.